Rome wasn't built in a day, or at least it wasn't officially. Technically, the city of Rome was founded on April 21st, 753 BC by Romulus, the first king of the city. Although there is no archaeological evidence that can prove his existence, he's still an important figure in ancient Roman mythology, and thus in world history. So who exactly was Romulus? Let's find out. Welcome to the channel. Romulus, the first king of Rome, had a twin brother named Remus, and their story actually started well before they were born. Their grandfather, Numitor, was the king of a small Italian kingdom called Alba Longa. But one of Numitor's relatives, Amulius, overthrew him and banished Numitor's children, including Numitor's daughter, Rhea Silvia, from the city. Amulius wanted to make sure that none of Numitor's descendants could take the throne after him, so he ordered Rhea Silvia to be made a Vestal Virgin, which meant she wasn't allowed to marry or have children. But even after being made a Vestal Virgin, Rhea Silvia ended up having twin boys, Romulus and Remus, by the god Mars. As soon as Amulius found out about this, he ordered the twins to be put into a basket and set adrift down a nearby river. Now, this part of the story seems to have been inspired by an actual event. There were several other early Italian cities that, according to tradition, were founded by people escaping in a basket down a river, including the city of Pisa. However, Romulus and Remus weren't just dumped into the river and left to their fate. They were actually saved from drowning by a she-wolf, who then nursed them as if they were her own pups. And the boys were later found and taken in by a shepherd named Faustulus and his wife, Acca Laurentia. So while it's possible that Romulus and Remus were literally basket children, it doesn't seem likely that they were raised by a wolf. After Romulus and Remus grew up under the care of their adoptive parents, they decided to set out and find the city of Alba Longa, which they believed was their true birthplace. When Romulus and Remus arrived at Alba Longa, they found that their grandfather, Numitor, was still alive. And although they didn't realize it at the time, they also found that their grandfather had actually been waiting for their arrival. Before he stepped down as king of Alba Longa, Numitor had made a deal with the neighboring kings of the Sabine and Etruscan city-states. The deal was that once Numitor's royal descendants showed up, those kings would give them the land between the Tiber and the Tiberino rivers to establish a new city-state of their own. This land would become the original boundaries of Rome. When Romulus and Remus told their grandfather that they wanted to establish a new settlement, Numitor knew that the time had come to step away from his role as king and pass the crown to one of the twins. Now it seems like Romulus and Remus might have ruled Alba Longa together as co-kings after their grandfather, but they probably didn't rule there for very long. According to Livy, the first king of Rome, Romulus was king for 36 years, and most of that time was spent establishing settlements around Latium. So it seems like he was only king of Rome for a relatively short time. Romulus's next major accomplishment as king was defeating the nearby Sabines in battle, which solidified Rome's claim to all of the land between the Tiber and the Tiberino rivers. It was after this victory that Romulus began inviting other people from around Italy to settle in Rome. He wanted Rome to be a city open to all Italians, regardless of their ethnicity or background. In fact, it was during Romulus's reign that Rome became a sanctuary for refugees from neighboring states. People who were escaping an abusive family, criminal charges, or even just looking to start a new life could find safety within Rome's city walls. But not everyone was happy about all these new arrivals. One day, Romulus held a large festival, inviting all of the men of Rome to participate in games and athletic competitions. The winners of these competitions would receive prizes, and their names would be written down to be honored in future years. But there was a huge problem when it came time to hand out the prizes because none of the organizers could agree on who had won what. So they asked a Trojan prince named Helenus, who was a guest of Rome at the time, to help settle the dispute. Helenus said that he needed some way to keep track of the athletes and their accomplishments, so someone suggested using wax tablets. But Helenus said that that wouldn't work because the tablets would melt. Instead, he suggested using clay tablets instead. This innovation helped settle the argument, but it also gave Helenus the idea to do something else. Because writing on clay tablets was so much easier than writing on stone tablets, Hellenus decided to use clay to make the first Roman coins. These early Roman coins were called asses, and they were stamped with the head of Romulus on one side and a she-wolf suckling Romulus and Remus on the other. It wasn't just clay that Romulus encouraged people to experiment with, though. He was also responsible for introducing the Latin alphabet to Rome. Previously, the Etruscans were the only ones in Italy using an alphabet to write their language, and they were pretty secretive about it. But Rome was such a melting pot of different cultures that it needed a way to record the many different languages spoken within its city. So Romulus invited an Etruscan to teach Romans how to read and write using the Etruscan alphabet. But instead of just giving the alphabet to Romans, the Etruscan demanded that they pay him 100 pounds of gold. Romulus agreed to the price, and once the Etruscan taught Romans how to read and write, they paid him the gold and also let him keep the alphabet. Some historians say that it was actually the Greeks who first taught Romans how to read and write, and the alphabet used in ancient Greece was actually very similar to the modern Greek alphabet we know today. Still, it's generally accepted that the Latin alphabet as we know it today evolved directly from the alphabet Rome bought from the Etruscans. Unfortunately, not everything Romulus touched turned into gold. One of his most famous building projects was the construction of the Roman Forum, which was basically a large open space in the center of Rome where people could do business and hold public events. The Forum was originally nothing more than a swampy lake, but Romulus drained the water and laid the foundation for the most important building in Roman civic life. Not all of Romulus's policies were successful, though. During his reign, Rome experienced a severe drought, and to fix the problem, he dedicated a group of senators to oversee the distribution of grain to anyone who was hungry. He also established a system of aqueducts to bring fresh water from the nearby hills into the city. But despite these efforts, the drought continued for 7 years. To make things worse, bands of people from neighboring city-states began attacking Rome because they were tired of Rome stealing their water. Finally, in the middle of the 8th year, lightning struck the top of Mount Aventine, and Romulus declared that this was a sign from the gods that they should build a temple to the god of thunder, Jupiter, atop the mountain. Atop the mountain, Romulus also built his own luxurious residence, along with residences for other high-ranking senators. Although Romulus was successful at making Rome a safe haven for refugees and a melting pot of different cultures, he wasn't as successful at keeping the peace with neighboring states. His reign saw frequent battles against the Etruscans, the Latins, and the Sabines. Romulus's constant warfare eventually took its toll on the citizens of Rome, and they began to wish for a king who could lead them to true peace and prosperity. And you thought you had a hard day at work. Now, whether Romulus was a good king or not depends on who you ask. On one hand, he established Rome as a sanctuary for refugees and a place where people from all over Italy could live together in peace. He expanded the city's borders, introduced new technologies, and created a powerful military. On the other hand, he started many wars with neighboring city-states, failed to end a devastating drought, and lived a life full of luxury while his people suffered. According to legend, Romulus's reign ended when he killed his twin brother Remus, after Remus criticized Romulus's decision to attack the Sabine city of Altina. Romulus would go on to rule over Rome for another 29 years, until he was killed in battle against the Veientines. Although there is no evidence that any of this actually happened, Livy's history of Rome tells the story of Romulus as if it were absolutely true. And it was Livy's version of events that served as the basis for all subsequent writings about Rome's legendary founder. So what really makes Romulus so important to world history? Well, the legendary Rome that Livy described in his book wasn't just a collection of myths. Rather, it was the foundation upon which all of classical Rome would be built. And while the historical reality of Romulus may have been far less impressive than the stories tell us, the myth of Romulus would inspire generations of Romans to strive for greatness and world domination. Thanks for watching. If you liked this video, check out our other videos about ancient Rome. And thanks to our supporters for helping us make this content.